can hear that process that is actually...
Yeah, of course, because you hear it inside.
Yeah. Like the gas is now going up.
Yeah, exactly.
And then to the chips.
Yes.
It's quite something.
Can sound inspire us to think differently? We'll take you to places you'd probably never go. Remote, unfamiliar, not very appealing places, yet ones that are exciting and reveal much about the future challenges posed to our society. Ones that are rich in sound. Future Landscapes, a podcast on the challenges of humankind as heard in sound. In our previous episode, we went to the Budarhals hydropower station in Iceland, where electricity is produced to run a giant aluminum plant. A hydrophone placed below the water's surface indicated methane being emitted from the bottom of the dam, which warms the atmosphere. Now we're heading to fields where oil is extracted to power the mobility of our civilization, leaving behind the same result, the advancement of climate change. What does it sound like when the key liquid of modernity is extracted from the depths of the earth, and what more can it tell us than we already know? Holy Liquid, Episode 6, Žarošice Oil Well, Czech Republic.
So what do you think?
Feels like a party.
Fun?
Underground party.
Underground party.
But with angels singing too.
Yeah.
No, underwell party.
It's interesting how even like super industrial thing can sound this gentle.
Yeah.
In a way.
I think it's the resonance.
It's the resonance, yeah, sure.
Yeah, the resonance makes it smoothing.
And the rhythm.
Vineyards are typical for the landscape of southern Bohemia, where we're heading in this episode. At one point, we take a wrong turn, and our van gets stuck on the muddy road that runs alongside one of them. Alas, the reason we're here is not the wine, but the crude oil that is hidden beneath this idyllic landscape. Once we find the right road, we follow it through the cornfields until we reach the oil well. In the summer sun, the sight of it instantly makes us think we might be somewhere in Texas. Only the scale is smaller. Behind the fence, the pumpjack that keeps the well pump moving sways in a monotonous rhythm and never seems to stop. The liquid that's essential for the functioning of modern industrial society and enabling its unprecedented mobility has been mined in this region for more than a century. Now, musicians Václav Havelka and Throrarensen and philosopher of technology Lukáš Likavčan are eager to find out what sound can reveal about what's going on underground, while field recordist Sara Pinheiro amplifies it by attaching a geophone to the construction.
What I've heard was also specters, not a real, of course, like not a real ghost or something like that, but specters in a sense of some kind of messages from the deep past. Like some of those sounds, as they were so tribal, they have this ritualistic quality, and they remind us how the culture we live in is also full of rituals, because this is a sort of ritual as well. When we extract something from the ground, based on the images, we forget about the second plan of the landscape, or the second plan aesthetics that comes with the sound in this way.
Most of the oil comes from the Mesozoic era, which means it's between 66 and 252 million years old. Humans have found ways to exploit this brown liquid as early as 4000 BC. Ancient Persian tablets list the medicinal and illuminating uses of oil. The ancient Chinese, Sumerians, and Arabs also used oil. The world's first commercial oil well was established in 1856 in the village of Bubryka in present-day Poland. Since then, the technology for extracting this substance, which consists of large quantities of dead organisms from geological strata, has not significantly changed. When looking at the local infrastructure, which is neither large nor complex, the operation taking place here seems to be rather inconsequential. But the sound tells a different story.
Sound gives us, in this sense, an ability to perceive the slow change, the change that is imperceptible visually,
Yes.
the kind of change that is happening underground. I experienced that the first time I had my headphones on when we were recording the machine there, and suddenly I felt like I'm sensing the process. It looks like there's almost nothing happening instead of some simple machine doing a job that it was doing basically since the end of 19th century.
That's also one of the strengths of sound. It's never not physical. The difference is that you really contact with it. You're really aware of it.
Is that because you can't perceive any barriers between you and the sound? That the sound basically is very immersive in this way?
And it's because you don't perceive sound without materiality, without vibration, without propagation, without the space, So it's always physical. Digital sound, as such, actually doesn't exist, because for you to listen to it, it's not digital anymore.
Even though the Czech Republic is not known for oil, and in fact, not many Czechs are even aware of its production in their country, there are dozens of oil wells scattered around the area. Their size makes them relatively inconspicuous, and they're almost invisible from the main roads. Unsurprisingly, the country's overall oil production is rather tiny compared to its needs. 150 kilotons of oil are produced annually, while 7,000 kilotons are imported, which means that only 2% of the needs are met from own resources. A small oil well, such as the one near the village of Žarošice, produces 650 cubic meters per day, which, for illustration, would fill 20 swimming pools. This is the amount that all cars in the Czech Republic burn every day within 20 minutes, releasing 380 tons of CO2 into the air.
I was thinking about how we are unaware of the fact that the CO2 is waste from the economic process, from the process of consuming some high caloric remnants of past organisms. This kind of waste product is something that we are not aware of because it's invisible. It's actually all around us in this way. If we start to think about this as waste, suddenly we understand that it's something we have to get rid of to some extent. Because if you imagine the planet as a bathtub, it's already filled, and you cannot just switch the tap off. You also need to drain it a bit.
Right.
So that's why I find also interesting the place, how it invites us to think with these future emergencies of actually emergencies and the emergence of technologies of the carbon capture and storage.
This contemplation is of course also relevant to our sound expedition. During our journey into the infrastructures and ecosystems of the Czech Republic and Iceland, we traveled in a van that runs on gasoline. The amount of CO2 produced during our trip by car was almost 600 kilograms, and another 5 tons were added with the return flight. If we had chosen another means of moving between the two countries, the financial and time demands would have made this expedition almost impossible. In any case, one of its results is a remarkable contribution to climate change.
Think about the CO2 footprint and the way how every act of consumption, no matter what, creates some CO2 emissions. And now, is it better to think about this as an individual responsibility or rather as something that should be judged in aggregate, say on the level of the community or the city or the municipality or the state or the region? I think it would be a mistake to allocate responsibility for the emissions individually. We should do that on a different basis, because then we end up in actually acts of very bad injustice towards people who, for example, consume less, fly less, travel less, or do not have these kinds of consumption opportunities that we have in rich countries such as Czech Republic.
But at the same time, you cannot delegate the responsibility. You start with yourself, and you may or not become involved in actions that produce that kind of impact.
Only effect of taking this as an individual responsibility is that you have moral authority. But moral authority doesn't change the opinion of other people in the end.
There are several reasons why we decided to visit this place. The first one is obvious. Oil burning, along with coal burning, is one of the largest sources of CO2 emissions, and thus one of the main causes of climate change. The second one is symbolic. Most of the oil from this well, as well as from the entire area, has already been extracted. Its approaching closure date thus heralds the end of an era, one without oil. And finally, this site also suggests the possible future commercial use of the landscape, which was used for extraction in the past. A pilot project is already underway here, which aims to test the possibilities of returning the most hazardous byproduct created during the burning of oil, carbon dioxide, underground. This may seem like an ideal solution. However, such technologies allow us to continue with existing industrial production and energy systems without any substantial changes. Paradoxically, they can help to extend the use of coal and fossil fuel energy. At the oil field in Žarošice, the pumpjack sways in a monotonous rhythm to keep the pump barrels moving. Although we don't have visual contact with the processes taking place underground, the sonic evidence captured by Sara's microphones is proof that we're looking at a simple technology that hasn't changed for over 100 years.
Every technology creates its own accidents or unintended consequences. Like invention of the train is also invention of the train crash. And I wonder whether invention of this kind of like extractive infrastructure, whether the accident that is integral to it, which is the climate change, is not also an invitation to actually, create a different kind of society. I have also this crazy image in my head about a kind of like religious cult that will end not the extraction, but just the combustion of the oil and all the other fossil fuels. So people will extract it, but they will keep it as a religious liquid. And they will worship it, for example.
Wow.
And so then you can, for example, end the combustion by religious authority. You don't need policies or anything like that. This will be a site of burial, not of the extraction. And a new culture will emerge around that. Or it will be a consequence of the culture that will be obsessed or will be largely preoccupied with seeking redemption for its past.
In a sense, storing CO2 underground is a reminder of the fact that it is a substance that is naturally present in nature. Soil, for example, is the largest storer of CO2, with 2,500 gigatons all around the globe. It's released during the process of soil respiration, which is crucial for entire ecosystems. Organic matter, which is basically carbon, serves as food for plants, bacteria, fungi, and animals which breathe it out in the form of carbon dioxide. Human manipulation of CO2 is therefore not too far removed from what happens in natural processes.
It shows us how it is a prolongation of a certain planetary metabolism, of the energy metabolism. And it brings a realization that any kind of technology is a sort of prolongation of the natural metabolism by other means. It's like a continuation of the natural logistics. And the question is not like whether we do something natural or unnatural, but it's more about how we design with or against those affordances that the environment has. And I think thinking with the soundscape is a good way how to learn all the affordances, all these little features that the places have.
When we drive through the villages near the oil wells, we see nicely renovated houses, neat public spaces, and roads in good condition. The main source of local prosperity here is not Moravian wine, but taxes from oil production. Although the oil company gets the biggest share of the profits, the communities affected by the extraction also get their share. It's difficult to decide whether the compensation for the damage caused is adequate. However, dealing with the consequences of oil extraction and consumption is something that is beyond the capacity of oil companies. The pilot project for testing the storage of CO2 underground is not only funded by them, but mainly by national and European authorities, with strong cooperation from universities. This may change the rules of what is public and what is private in the future.
The amount of finance, infrastructure, labor force that you need to actually put this kind of new industry at scale will probably require a massive public and state investments.
Yeah.
Strong institutions, approval of the public and so on.
Yeah.
So you cannot do that just as a private company.
You're right.
At the scale that will be really helpful. You can always think about it as an interesting startup project. It can stay like that.
Yeah.
But in that case it won't be effective.
Yes.
And so we need an effective systems, and those effective systems means that we need systems that will be public, that will be owned by people and not by private companies. And so we can think about this place as something that is preparing perhaps a different future than even the representatives of those companies can imagine.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the first thing. And the second part of the counter-narrative, I guess, is understanding that every technology creates some culture around itself.
Yeah.
And this cultural aspect, these rituals, you can think about carbon capture and storage as a kind of sky burial. When you bury the past back into the ground, you make, again, talking about the sacral aspects of this place, brings us back here, brings us to the deeper cultural and maybe even spiritual and cosmological and mythological aspects of what does it mean to bury the sky in this way.
Oil has changed our world in unprecedented ways. It has kick-started globalization, brought a surge in the mobility of people, goods, and materials, and accelerated capitalism. But burning oil to power engines is not its only use. The entire universe of plastic, which allows for easy storage and distribution of food, is based on oil. Healthcare has rapidly risen to a higher level thanks to rubber and pharmaceuticals. Oil is also a key ingredient for pesticides and fertilizers in agriculture. And the list goes on, with textiles, paints, and thousands of other products. Today we know that its consumption has also brought environmental damage on a planetary scale, political conflicts, power games, and wars. The question is, what will happen to capitalism, which has been fueled by coal and oil, a resource that is not eternal in its supply?
Thinking about what to do with the corpse of the dying economic system, because it's like when you have a soil from which a new vegetables grow. The soil is actually remnants of the past organisms, and these corpses actually provide the kind of like creative destructive basis for the process of new growing. And in the same way, there's a dying body of capitalism, and that kind of corpse is quite huge, heavy, as you say, and it's gonna take a century or two just like to think about like, okay, what to do with all these infrastructures that we have around us, that we spread around the world. Are we going to abandon them? Are we going to repurpose them? Are we going to close them and just use them as a sites of, I don't know, like spiritual worship? Or is it going to be a theme park? Is it going to be a next, I don't know, extreme sport, just like to wander in the ruins of the past infrastructures? So many possibilities.
You've just heard the 6th episode of Future Landscapes, a podcast on the challenges of humankind based on a sonic expedition into the ambivalent technologies and ecosystems of the Czech Republic and Iceland. You can find much more at futurelandscapes.cz. Stay tuned to this podcast for more sonic journeys.